Let's see. Nope, I don't want to. We are live. Let's
All
see.
right.
Hang out. I got my two screens here, one above the other. Got my little 13-inch screen right here that you're on.
There you
Join Coach. Let's see if we are on the old interwebs. Recycle. Watch live. Come on. Hey,
go. Is it coming on?
we are live. I always have to
All
turn
right.
it on because there's an interesting, you'll see on your screen, we have the ability to see comments
Okay, I gotcha.
on the right. And sometimes, like I said in my email, if there is somebody who doesn't click the, yes, I want my name shown, it just says Facebook user. So we'll get like comment after comment after comment from Facebook user.
From Facebook
Just
user.
let them
Yeah.
know who Facebook user is. So I have Facebook up on the other screen so that if people are watching and they have questions, they put comments in, then I can see actually who they are. And the funny part is it's a good 40-second delay between the two. So
Oh,
if I
wow.
don't have the volume on that thing turned all the way down, I'm like talking to them. I'll have this whole conversation with myself the entire time. So
You're a good time though, so that works out.
that's right. I love hanging out with me. So let's see. We got 12 people. Let's see any posts. Yeah, but we'll kick it off and people can catch up. So
Sounds good, man.
tonight, this evening, or this afternoon, depending on what coast you're on, we are talking with the one and only. Oh, hey, Dana. Nancy, hi. Facebook user number 1 is Dana, and that's why I have Facebook up so I can see names.
Gotcha.
But we are talking with the one, the only Jeremy Fletcher, and I'm not going to do him any disservice by trying to tell his story. But Jeremy is a Warrior PATHH alumni, an Army veteran, and physical therapist. And we came across this topic based on the Warrior PATHH engagement on the alumni Facebook page, the private alumni Facebook page. And it was some folks, some alumni, brothers and sisters asking, hey, can we talk more about this? And you said, I'd love to. And the topic today is going to be pain management and a couple things wrapped around pain management, definition of pain, 3 types of pain, and mind, body, spirit approaches to pain management. I'm not going to talk about any of that. I'm going to listen and learn. I have plenty of pain experiences, but my man Jeremy is going to wax poetic and full of knowledge for us this evening once we get kicked off. But before we do that, why don't you tell us a little bit about you, your family, where you come from, service, all that stuff.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Well, man, first, I it's totally an honor to be here and really a privilege that I get to be here on your show, that I get to be here amongst other Warrior PATHH graduates too. It does feel like an alumni, and it feels like in a family. We've all gone through the same type of training with the same type of trainers, and it's that veteran connection. It's the Warrior PATHH connection, and so I'm really excited to be here to do that. And so about me, man, really, I guess I would say that I could probably start off by saying that I grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I was the son of Karen and Randy Fletcher. Karen and Randy got divorced when I was about 3 years old, and they had my brother Micah. And then, my mom had a lot of demons, man. She had a lot of issues. She had drug and alcohol problems, and she had a big heart. She had many great characteristics about her, but she didn't really have the skills and tools probably necessary to raise a family. But so she really struggled with dependency on a lot of things. And my dad left when I was early, and so it kind of left me in charge in a lot of ways of my brother. And then a few years later, she remarried, and then I had a half sister. So I grew up sort of responsible for those two by about the age of 9 or 10 years old. And by that time, my mom had already had a couple DUIs under her belt, and we had moved probably 6 or 7 times. and which speaks to my ability to handle instability really well. And so life had trained me to handle instability really well. And so, my grandfather saw that we were not growing in the direction that we should be, and he ended up coming home and raising my brother and my half sister. And so that gave me some semblance of stability and a role model, and I think that was critical to my future development. So from there, had a pretty typical high school years, and went to played baseball in college. So I was a college athlete, had a little bit of athletic ability, got a scholarship to play as a pitcher. Again, went to went to a college in South Louisiana, drank a lot, partied a lot, didn't attend school very much. And then went to a junior college in North Mississippi on a full ride there. So transferred out of there, met my wife, and never made another C ever in school again. I pretty much became A's and all A's and a couple of B's sprinkled in there after I met my wife. And it's really the person that provided me some semblance of stability in my life. And I'm still, in many ways, my saving grace today. And so from there, she said she wanted to stay home and have kids. And I was a high school teacher and coach, and she wanted to be a teacher as well. And so I said, I'm not sure how this is going to work out, that and the $40,000 of student loans I have. So I started exploring other options. And a friend of mine, who's now a mayor in a small town where we were playing baseball, he was a Marine. And he was a Marine Reserve guy. And he was like, man, you should join the Army Reserve. They have a lot of money right now, and you could go get some good training. And my grandfather served. I didn't really I never thought about serving in any capacity, but it's like, all right, well, I'll check it out. And sure enough, man, things really worked out. I became a medic. So I became a medic, and then became a physical therapy specialist as an additional skill identifier. Loved it. Said, hey, I want to go back to PT school. So did that. And so went to PT school 2007, 2010, graduated, went to, went from a staff sergeant in my Army Reserve unit as a medic to a captain and a doctor of physical therapy on active duty Army. Fort Stewart, Georgia, served 5 years there, including a deployment to Afghanistan. And then came back, was put in charge of the rehab facility there, Fort Stewart, Georgia. And from there, I just had some great experiences. I mean, my whole Army career was amazing as far as professional development goes. Experienced some pretty significant loss and grief while I was deployed. I literally flew all the way around every combat outpost within our AO in Afghanistan and cared for our population of about 5,000 at that time. And so I lost some good friends in Afghanistan, also lost the grandfather who provided me some semblance of stability. And then I came back home, and I really just tried to work myself to death instead of dealing with my emotional distress. And really suffered a lot there. Became a complete and utter disgusting semblance of a husband and father to my 3 kids, and one of which has autism. And so, really was at a place where a friend of mine had recommended me to come to Boulder Crest Retreat and said, hey man, you need to check this place out. So did that. And I was a Warrior Path 0024. And just an amazing experience. And I would say no doubt that it was a turning point in my life. So went there, came back home, started actually doing counseling after that. Realized I had a tremendous amount of adverse childhood experiences in my life, and started to own those things and understand those things. And through my own strengths that I had inherent in some of those things, especially the spiritual dimension of life, has always been my faith has always been a pretty strong characteristic that I think I was kind of taught by my grandfather, and so I've carried those things forward. And now I'm an assistant professor at the University of South Alabama, about to transition, been there for 6 years, about to transition into a full-time role as a director of community integration for a nonprofit organization called Veterans Recovery Resources in Mobile, Alabama. So I'm a doctor of physical therapy. I have my board certification in orthopedics, and I've published and written on the topics of chronic pain. Recently published a book chapter actually on spiritually integrated rehabilitation for physical therapists. So that's sort of my expertise in physical therapy, is in the area of pain management. So that's what brings me here. And so I was on the thread and reading all the comments, and like I just feel compelled to really help in any way I can with any brothers and sisters that might be struggling with pain related issues.
Yeah, man. And you certainly have a great story, and you're a tremendous human being. I remember 024 like it was yesterday. It was some good times in that class. You had a good group, and you're just kind of following your story as you've gone apart. You've been a part of some other things we've done in the past in terms of being kind of on like a steering committee and test driving some of the innovation we've worked through over the years, and just always been that voice of reason and opportunity, and had very thoughtful with your comments and kind of giving us sharing your voice and sharing your beliefs and sharing your experience with us. So it's great to have you on here, and I look forward to hearing everything you've got to share tonight. So what we're going to do, we're going to let Jeremy get after it and talk about definition of pain, like I said, then the 3 types of pain, and then a mind, body, spirit approach to pain. And at the end of that, and I kind of put it in the chat box there, have some questions ready, because when he's done talking, I'd love to be able to ask direct questions from you to him and get some feedback for you. And again, we always say it, if you're hopping on and you're joining in through a StreamYard link, click the button so we can see your name. Otherwise, it'll just say Facebook user. So we may not know who we're talking to, but we will say, hey, Facebook user. We'll answer that particular question. And if you're coming on late and you're watching this and it is no longer live, still put your questions in there, because we always come back and try and answer any questions that come up even after the live portion has ended. So without further ado, take us away, my brother.
All right, man. That sounds great. So I think the thing, and the reason why I want to lead with this, so the reason why I want to lead with sort of the definition of pain is that what we sort of know about pain in our society today is there's many different beliefs and attitudes and some perceptions. Some are accurate, some are not so accurate about what pain is. And so I really wanted to lead with the definition. And it's really that it's a sensory and emotional experience that really can be actual or perceived tissue damage. Now, so there's a couple of different things within that definition. And one is that it's a sensory experience. That means that that incorporates in totality all of our primary senses. So when you look at CT scans, MRI images of people that are experiencing pain, and as many people talk about, it's a subjective experience. It's something that people, have. Pain is an experience. It's their experience, it's an individual experience, but it incorporates, sight, it incorporates sound, it incorporates taste, it incorporates touch, temperature, vibration, all these sensory experiences that we have as human beings. All of those things really are a part of our pain experience. And it's also an emotional experience. So you can almost think of pain in some ways in the same way that you can love, in the same way that you can joy, in the same way that you can anger, and some of those core emotions that we and you guys that we talk about in Warrior Path, right? Some of these core emotions. And so there's 2 parts of this. So we talk about in our field like a biopsychosocial experience of pain. And so what that means, the bio component is those sensory experiences. That's the nervous system. As the nervous system perceives some kind of stimulus from the environment and sends these signals up to our brain to say, hey, you might want to pay attention to that right there. You're having some pain experience there, right? So that's the bio component. Well, pain also has like a meaning and purpose component. So it motivates us to do something. And in that way, it's a stimulus for different behavior as well. So if like psychologically, I'm already under a tremendous amount of distress psychologically, my pain experience is also going to be heightened as well, right? So there's this relationship between the biology and the psychology. We also know that like our social environment plays a tremendous role in how we experience pain as well. So, if we're around a bunch of people that don't support us, and we're around people that promote shame, like we're going to have heightened levels of pain experience within that. So we know some of those things too. So our social environment that we keep also influences the intensity of the experience that we have, and also the frequency with which we have a pain experience. So I like to start off with that to kind of understand, conceptually what pain is, right? So the pain is a sensory experience. If I go and touch a hot stove, like there's a sensory experience there, right? Like a temperature, there are sensors within our peripheral nervous system. That's kind of the brain, the spinal cord, and those nerves that come off. They sense that information and they send that information back up to the spinal cord, back up to the brain for processing to say, hey, your foot is burning. You might want to move it away, right? And there's a withdrawal response. So that's a normal response. It's healthy. It's normal. It's exactly what we're designed to have and designed to do. And that's really the essence of the first type of pain. So we had a kind of definition. And the first type of pain is called acute, or really it's called nociceptive pain. And nociception is a really scientific term, but it really means like sensory experience. So chemicals, you talk about the type of medications that medics like me prescribed, right? Vitamin M or Motrin, right? Motrin is an anti-inflammatory medication. An anti-inflammatory medication is to decrease the amount of inflammatory, in the science world we call them mediators. That is, those things that either make things better or those things that make things worse. So inflammation in the tissue, right? So we could talk about like the skin or the nerve itself or the joint in the case of things, medical diagnoses like arthritis and what have you. Like there's these inflammatory components to that. We want to diminish those because our senses are always telling us, hey, these inflammatory things are down there. They're sending signals up to our brain, and that is telling us that we have pain, right? So we call that nociception pain. The second type of pain is called peripheral neuropathic. Peripheral means outside of the central nervous system. So we have our brain, our spinal cord, and then our periphery. Our periphery is anything outside of the spinal cord. So that's all of our nerves. So that's what peripheral means. The neuropathic component of that just means the nervous system. So the peripheral neuropathic is our periphery nerves. So any kind of problem that we have with a nerve is going to be a different type of pain. Many people with medical diagnosis understand this to be like, the common term that you hear is a radiculopathy in medical diagnosis, right? Or neuropathy. So diabetics that may have a loss of sensation along their feet or their hands, we call this a neuropathy. It's a problem with the peripheral nerve and how it's conducting sensation back to the brain and the spinal cord. In the case of a lumbar radiculopathy, that, if you've been jumping out of airplanes for a really long time and you've got diminished disc height and you go to the doctor and they tell you that, oh man, it's the worst back I've ever seen and all those kind of things. Well, what they're saying is that nerve that's being pinched, we talk about a pinched nerve. That's a big term that's used a lot of times. And so that nerve is pinched, right? And it's creating this pain that's going down the back of the leg, oftentimes, especially if it goes down past the knee. We call that peripheral neuropathic pain. So those are the two main types. The third type is called central sensitization. And this is the one that really represents what most people consider chronic pain. right? And so you have this central nervous system. You got the brain, the spinal cord, and what happens is I tell people a lot, like, especially when I'm working with spiritual components of pain management and people that really have a spiritual basis. Like I say, God, pain is like God's megaphone. And the reason why I say that is because initially in those nociceptive acute phases, those early on phases where like I've stumbled my toe or I've stepped on a rock or I twisted my knee, like they're really subtle, right? Like we can kind of drive through a lot of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But when we don't listen to it and we don't pay attention to it and we do nothing different in our behavior, right? We do nothing different, then that megaphone starts getting louder. And in fact, from science, what we know is that the brain and the spinal cord actually heighten their awareness of those peripheral nerves. And we call that sensitization. So it becomes more sensitive. And the way we explain this a lot in the way I talk with my patients about this is almost like an alarm system. So if you can think of your pain system as one alarm system for your body, right? We have this alarm system that alerts us to when we have threats. And so there is some threat appraisal that does happen when we're under pain. And that's why we have these complex interactions between, post-traumatic stress and pain experiences. They're often very much the same, and people often experience these same at the same time. And I've had my own PTSD, complex pain experience myself, so I've had to kind of work through these avenues myself. So what you really are dealing with is a heightened alarm system whenever you're experiencing chronic pain. So what that means is, imagine you have your home and it has an alarm system, and you have the sensitivity of that system set to where, like, a cat can just barely brush its tail up against a window and that will set off the alarm.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we have a term for that in the medical terminology. It's called allodynia, but it's this heightened sensitivity to touch. That's what it is. And that's a problem that we have in chronic pain, is when we become overly sensitive to touch. There's another, and then, equally so, we have another one that's called hyperalgesia, which is where normal things that should create an activation of an alarm system, like those things require more pressure to activate the alarm system. So you have different ways that this alarm system that we have behaves. So basically, in kind of summary, we have we have a sensory system. We have basically, three different types of pain. We have this acute nociceptive pain. We have this peripheral neuropathic pain, which is the nerves that are affected themselves. And then we have the central nervous system that becomes overactive, right? And so this is where, like, opportunities for intervention are present. And you can kind of treat pain in accordance with these three different types. So, the first type, the nociceptive problem, is one where we do, medications can be helpful. Like medications, like anti-inflammatory medications, those can be helpful. Peripheral neuropathic problems. Medications, and I'm not a medical doctor, I'm a physical therapist, so I can't give you specific advice on that, but what I can say is that this is a role that medications can play to decrease the central nervous system's response. And also peripheral neuropathic pain, the nerves that are affected, there are medications to help with nerve type pain. There are some crazy side effects to some of those medications as well. Right? Then we have the central nervous system issue that really can be managed sometimes with antidepressant medications, because that does help to kind of calm down our system. So there are medications that can help across those three different types of systems. But what I think the most powerful mediators are, in fact, what we're finding in the literature, is obviously that there's a role for this psychology to play in here. And this is where I think the tools and skills that you teach throughout Boulder Crest and Warrior Path are really helpful to also manage pain. So there's a tremendous amount of literature in the areas of mindfulness and meditation to really help turn the dial down on the pain alarm system and the level of sensitivity that is present in the central nervous system. And so you can kind of think of this as like a top-down approach. So instead of bottoms up, where like, all right, I step on a nail and now I've created some tissue problem that's created this inflammation in the sending signals up to my brain. Like, that's a bottoms up approach to pain. Now we have new approaches that tell us that you can turn the dial down from the top down. And that's why meditation and mindfulness are so powerful to help us turn the dial down on the pain signal. And science has really proven that these are things that we don't need to be ancillary to pain management care. Like, you don't need to just take medications. Like, in fact, you probably need to be doing these things first before you take medications. And so that is what I really want to emphasize from sort of this mind, body, spirit approach, is that mind, from the mind's perspective, the thought patterns that we have, and specifically the level of acceptance that we have with our pain. So the type of relationship that we have with our pain is very important. So I've heard, Josh talk about pain is suffering. I mean, pain is inevitable and suffering is optional. And there is not only is that like a really cool statement that Viktor Frankl makes, that's really cool, that we all want to adopt, but in fact, like, science totally validates that statement, because pain is an inevitable experience. Suffering really becomes a choice, and that choice is made. And I could get into the neurological details of why this is a choice from a psychological perspective, but it truly is a choice, because it's almost like the more we learn to accept our pain experience, the more able we are to have less pain. And the way I talk about this with my patients is really, and this is what I've had to do myself, is the more you wrestle with pain, the more you wrestle with it, the more you try to eliminate it and eradicate it, the worse often it gets. And it's the same thing with anxiety and other mental health type conditions. The more you ingrain yourself in what's wrong, like, the worse you get. Right. And so from an acceptance and commitment therapy perspective, the more that we can really find meaning and purpose, the smaller our pain begins to feel. And that holds true in the literature too. That's not like some kind of like science definitely tells us that. And to me, that is one of the most profound breakthroughs in pain management that we've had over the last 20 years, is this understanding that pain is 100% of the time perceived in the brain. So that means that, instead of constantly and continually using medications, now we have new opportunities to explore from both a cognitive or thought process, but also like a spiritual process. And when we're talking about spiritual, we're talking about existentialism and meaning and purpose. And so the more you live in accordance with your values, the more you refine the values that you've decided to live in accordance with, the more meaning and purpose you will have, the less pain that you will experience. And, when I was reading the comments in the Facebook group, I'm like, you guys, like mindfulness, meditation, these things are extremely valuable as a toolkit to help manage pain as an experience. Now, there was another user in there that was talking about, I say Facebook user, so one of the persons that was in there was talking about the role of nutrition in this experience as well. And in fact, that's also another important aspect of total pain care, is not only this mind, not only the spiritual aspect, but also this body. I mean, we cannot eliminate our body from this experience.
Mm-hmm.
So the role that nutrition really plays here is in decreasing the amount of inflammatory mediators, those inflammatory responses that do incite that nociceptive process. So the way I talk to patients a lot about with this is basically, if you go back to this home alarm system metaphor, like, if you think of poor nutrition, smoking, other lifestyle behaviors, you can think of those as like you're throwing little tiny pebbles at the window of that system that you're alerting yourself to. And it's like constant bombardment of the system over and over and over. And when we're eating high sugary foods, when we're consuming high levels of alcohol, when we are, when we're smoking, doing things like that, that continues to bombard those low level senses that say, hey, there's this constant level of inflammation present, and it continues to activate the areas of the brain for that pain response. So when we eat healthy, when we drink lots of water, when we make smarter dietary choices, I mean, there's some psychological benefits to that as well. But just from a pure chemistry perspective, we're also decreasing the amount of times that we're tapping into that nervous system to really, piss it off, so to speak, in the brain and the mind. So, I was just really excited when I was reading, and one person in particular had a really great therapist that was leading them through some, graded exercise exposure, and was giving them some cognitive skills, and was also, talking about nutrition with this person. And what got me excited about that was that when I was at Boulder Crest, the most profound statement I heard was, it's not about what's wrong, it's about what happened. And you can put that within the context of pain really nicely, because, it is about what happened. It's still about the trauma that we carry. It's still about the choices we make. It's still about, the foods we eat. It comes down to our suffering is determined oftentimes by the choices that we make. And so I think that's a really profound thing that I wanted to carry. So with that being said, those were the big things that I wanted to communicate through this channel tonight.
And we had Michaela Mack, who came through last year, and she totally agreed with you. She said, yes, I've been doing TM after physical therapy, and it helps calm her down and help with the pain that she's experienced. And another alumni, Nancy, said meds, ! Meditation, exercise, diet, sleep, which is, I think, the greatest definition of meds. Go take your meds. Meditation.
I love that.
Diet, sleep. That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that, Nancy, because it is so true. And you think about, my wife and I have these conversations, and whether about ourselves, about each other, family members who are dealing with different ailments and aches and pains. And it really comes down to those, like you said, those primary things before medication is, what are you doing for yourself? What are you doing to take care of yourself? And it is all mind, body, spirit. It's why our triangle is mind, body, finance, and spirit, because all of those things play into our holistic wellness. Every aspect of that plays into our wellness. And I love your perspective, and I love even more that it's backed by science. Because it's so, and it's not something that we, the bullhorn shouts, this medication will get you that. And then in all the little bitty tiny fine print, it'll give you all these other things too, that you're going to need more medication. So it's very refreshing to hear you talk about holistic ways and more natural ways, and ways that have been utilized for goodness knows how many years to address pain. Now I'm thinking, at one point you're talking about the way we perceive pain, how we experience pain being different. And I know when I was a chef, I could reach into that 350 degree oven barehanded and pull out one tray and put another one in. And it was like, it wasn't that I was immune to pain. I had a nice 1/4 inch callus on my finger that I was lifting that joker up with. My body protected me from my own stupid choices. But it's very interesting to think about how we perceive pain And
Yeah.
when we're struggling, our ability to perceive pain, anything other than, something that's just weighing us down, knocking us down, destroying us, this can be very, very difficult to navigate away from that mindset in the midst of struggle.
Yeah. And there's like, there's negative and there's positive momentum that can be built in both of those directions. And you can get in these feedback loops where, both, and I feel like, when I think back, and I still have my, the arc that we did there, and I still remember my wellness, moments, and like the relationship between the physical, the emotional, the mental, and the spiritual distress that you can experience. I think what was really helpful for me as I navigated my own pain experience with that was, I think developing a vocabulary to be able to communicate that was really helpful for me. So to be able to, both journal that out and write what I was experiencing and be able to see those things as they were happening and then be able to kind of give voice to those was a really powerful thing. I feel like that's also the role that, counseling, but also journaling and sharing with your peers and talking about these experiences can be really helpful for, but then also like the practices to help you stay, centered. I think that was another thing that's been extremely helpful for me, because it was whenever I started increasing, my, the TM, and for me, I've shifted a little bit more toward, like prayer, contemplative prayer, and also, I do some like Encounter, which is a Christian meditation app that I use now, and I really love that. And but when I started increasing that, then I started noticing my sleep was better, and then I'm waking up in the morning and feeling like, oh wow, like I feel better today. So, like I have a little bit more life that day, and then I'm more likely to make the better choices that day, and then that night I'm like going to bed being more thankful and having more gratitude, and then the next morning I'm waking up and being like, wow, that was a really great day yesterday. And so like there's this momentum that begins to build. And for most people, it's finding out, and for me, it was finding out that one critical habit, the one critical thing that needed to be started, and then it begins to snowball into a really positive thing. And then for me, I've been able to work through refining what that is. So now for me, I start my mornings off with yoga. I've realized I'm a person that I have to have, like I like a lot of physical input to my body. Like I need that. And my job is one where I'm really typing on a computer a whole lot, and I'm not getting a whole lot of physical stimulus. So in the morning, I need to feel a sense of being grounded. And then I can move into my daily meditation. And that's sort of my routine that I really like, that helps me to remain present, and also, manages my anxiety the best. Like I don't have near as much, thoughts that are stemming all the time in my mind.
Right.
So yeah, those have been my experiences.
Thinking about this whole, we're catching up pretty close to a year of this COVID business, and before we got on, we were talking about, because there's also the perception wrapped around COVID, and I'm not talking about what you believe or don't believe or any of that stuff in relationship to it, but whether it's been a blessing or a curse. And there's been so many. We were talking about the opportunities that have been presented to us, and when it happened, when it went down, it was like, cool, what do I get to do with this now? What do I get to do with this? And
yeah,
one of those things that I got to do was spending a whole lot more time in this office versus in PATHH programs, or traveling to do some work here and there, and sitting at this desk all day long and then I'd stand up and I'd go from, what am I, 41? I think I'm 41. I'd go from entering my office at 41 and getting up for lunch at like 96. Like, oh, my hips are locked up, and oh man, I got to get a different chair. I need to stand up more. I'm building things with boxes to get my computer up in the air. Yeah. And it's, you know, have you seen a shift in how people are dealing with the everyday aches and pains in relationship to old injuries, new, you know, just the mindset? Has there been a mindset shift that you've seen in your patients, or even in your everyday life, when it comes to dealing with our wellness and our pain in this kind of arena of being stuck at home a lot in some senses? And some people, working from home has become the norm now for people.
Yeah.
And taking care of yourself. And, you know, I've gotten a habit for me of walking 2 to 3 times a day, in the morning and then at lunch and then at the end of the day, for both physical and, you know, emotional reasons. I'd walk in the morning to get up and get some exercise. I walk at lunch to get up and get away from my desk, so I can open up them hips a little bit. And then in the afternoon or in the evening after work, I would walk, and it became my wife and I's date walk. It was an opportunity to reconnect. Obviously, it's healthy, right? I get almost 5 miles in a day when I do that, but it was an opportunity for her and I to connect over a, you know, 1.5 mile loop around the neighborhood. But
yeah,
I don't know that, you know, what's your experience with all that in terms of how people are, what you've seen from how people are managing the everyday aches and pains that can obviously fester and become more than just you know, tight hips. It becomes, now I don't want to do anything because everything hurts.
Right. Yeah. You know, I, as you were describing that, what was coming to my mind was the emphasis that you were placing on the things that you care about. And you care about your family, you care about your job, you care about your interactions with others and your ability to have you know, an influence on other people's lives. And that's what's going to cause you to also, you know, endure a really long day in front of a computer screen now versus, you know, like, okay, well, man, this really sucks. I mean, that could be another approach. Like, there's other approaches that you could take with that, but you chose to see it as an opportunity because you're doing what you value and you're doing what you care about. And that's kind of the basis and the starting point for learning to be able to accept the pain experiences that we have, has been when we are doing activities that are in accordance with our values, the things that we really care about. That is where we build capacity for suffering, right? Like you can build some tremendous capacity for suffering when you are doing the things that you care about. And not to say that suffering is the goal, right? Like, we're not trying to suffer, we're not trying to struggle, we're not doing those things, but the more in line that we are with the things that we care about, the less pain we'll experience. So it's also how we generate hope and optimism. So in your environment where you are, you're seeing yourself as being optimistic. Like, you're like, you know, how can I take advantage of this new thing that life has given me, instead of viewing it in a different way? And I think that is what I've tried to do. Although many times I'm kind of a planner person, but I've realized in COVID that plans really are stupid, and that I really just need to embrace the day. Like, because I think that's the one thing that I've learned more than anything through COVID has been, like, my Michael Hyatt project planner thing is really stupid. Like, I mean, so because every day I'm rewriting everything, and it's just so it doesn't work. And so, like, I've really had to just, you know, stick to habits and routines, and that's where I feel like I'm gaining some semblance of control, is in just being consistent in habits and routines, you know, and accepting that that is what this period of time is offering me too. So I feel like personally that is where I am right now, but that's not to say that I haven't had periods of time over the last, 9-10 months now that like life has really sucked at times,
Right.
and I've had a bad day, and like I've just learned that I need to communicate those things, whether it's through writing or journaling, or whether it's through talking with my wife on a long walk,
Yeah.
and like, and that's how I've been able to manage that. In terms of like pain, if you take that approach of what's wrong, it's easy to find out that, oh, isolation is a really big problem when it comes to managing pain. Being isolated from other people, you begin to feel alone, you begin to feel desperate, you begin to feel all the things that you normally feel in a depressed state, and those are normal consequences of isolation, much less if you're already in a tremendous amount of distress and suffering.
Right.
So, like, so I really think, that mindset has a tremendous role to play in how we perceive it, but it's also, I don't want to discount the role that, like, depressed states, it's really hard to see that stuff.
Right.
Like when you're in those states, it's really difficult to see that stuff, and, really stepping out and engaging with your friends, engaging in social ways, and looking out for those other people that are really struggling, and being there for them can also be very therapeutic for yourself. And that's why I really like peer-to-peer relationships, I mean, and I think we all suffer and struggle together much better than we do alone. Like that's really,
Absolutely.
I think it's important too.
Yeah.
I don't know if that helped, man, but that's just been
it's just
thoughts
and get your perspective on it. It is, it's that, like you said, there's multiple levels of pain, and that when we are only trying to deal with it medicinally and hope that does it, and don't do anything, we don't take action. That's one of the big things, as you know, and any of the Warrior Path alumni watching this, or that will be watching this, is we're all about action. Like, don't talk about it, be about it. You're going to do different to get different. And that starts, like you said, it starts with mindset. It starts with the mentality of getting up every day and putting your feet on the ground and saying, all right, it's my day, and I'm in charge of my attitude. I'm in charge of my effort, and no one or nothing is going to change that. And having those practices and having a routine, and sometimes our routines are wonderfully interrupted by chaos. Whether or not we understand that or appreciate that in the moment is left to be said, because I think we all have those days. But if we take those moments to just embrace it and wrap some perspective and understanding around it, it carries that whole spectrum. It allows us to live the lives we want to live. It allows us to embrace and understand and change in some form or fashion the pain and the suffering that we deal with. And like I said, I think your approach is very refreshing, and it's great to hear. I know that there have been a couple comments on here about how valuable this has been, and like I said, I appreciate you coming and hanging out and sharing your experience and your wisdom and your training and your belief and the work you do. I know the work you're getting ready to do with the nonprofit's going to be outstanding. So I was just going to put it out there. If anybody's on this deal that has any questions for Jeremy, pop it in the comment section. We'll hang out for a minute and see if we got any that come up, and we'll ask them and you'll answer them. And otherwise, we'll let you get back to hanging out with that wonderful family of yours.
Yeah, man. No, it's a great honor. And like, I'll throw out my stuff too, man. I mean, J Fletcher at southalabama.edu. If you have questions, you need answers. I mean, I'm always available to answer questions, man.
That's awesome.
I don't like to watch people suffer, unfortunately. That's one thing I've learned about myself. I don't like to watch people suffer.
You have definitely taken action in every arena of your life to help people navigate that, learn from it, and then move past it. And I think that's one of the remarkable things from your training, from your experience, from prior service, in service, and now after still serving different arena. But it's the same. That's one of your very strong threads that's pulled all the way through is helping people navigate and move past struggle in a great way. So, man, I appreciate you. It was great to have you on here, and we'll do it again, man. And again, guys, you got all sorts of knowledge from Jeremy, and a little bit of contact information. Facebook or alumni, Warrior Path Alumni. You can hit him up on the Facebook group as well. Other than that, brother, I appreciate you. Thanks for hanging out, and enjoy your family, and have a great rest of your evening, man.
Thanks, Coach. Appreciate it, brother.
All right, guy.
All right, Val.
Bye.